Kai Mercer crouched behind a jagged ice formation, his breath steaming in the bitter air of Veyron Prime's northern valley. The wind cut across the frozen cliffs like a blade, carrying the sharp smell of ozone from distant electrical storms. His mission was clear: reach the northern crater and recover the energy cores the Consortium had abandoned during their hasty retreat. But as his eyes scanned the white wasteland, something unexpected caught his attention. A faint whimpering sound came from the ice below, carried weakly by the wind. Kai froze, squinting through the snow. At first he thought it was a trick of the storm, a distortion in the howling gale. Then he saw them, 3 tiny shapes huddled together, shivering violently, their wings so thin and translucent they almost glowed under the pale light. Dragon hatchlings, alone in the frozen wasteland, exposed to the storm. Kai's instincts screamed that leaving them would mean certain death. But helping them was dangerous. The Consortium patrolled these valleys with drones and heavily armed guards. Any diversion, any delay could cost him his life, and his mission. Yet, something inside him refused to ignore the fragile creatures. He moved slowly, keeping low, making sure no movement triggered snow slides or caught attention from the patrols. His gloved hands trembled slightly from the cold, but he forced himself to stay calm. The hatchlings huddled closer together, their tiny tails wrapped around each other. Kai could see their fear, eyes wide, reflecting the harsh light like small liquid sapphires. When he reached them, the youngest one shivered so violently it could barely hold its tiny head up. Kai lowered his jacket and carefully scooped it into the thermal lining. The other 2 hesitated for a moment, watching him. He whispered softly, "It's okay, you're safe now." It wasn't just words, it was a promise. Slowly they crawled into the folds of his coat, nudging their heads against him. The storm was relentless. Snow whipped against his face, stinging his skin. The wind tore at his jacket, and the ice under his boots threatened to crack. Each step forward was a struggle. He couldn't see the path clearly, cliffs dropped off sharply, hidden by drifting snow. One false step could send him tumbling into the abyss. Yet he kept moving, careful and deliberate, feeling the warmth of the hatchlings against him. Their tiny hearts beat fast, synchronized with his own. Kai had survived harsh conditions before, but this was different. He was responsible for more than himself now. The hatchlings depended on him. Every sound in the storm, the cracking of ice, the distant hum of drones, set his nerves on edge. He scanned constantly, calculating, improvising routes, using ice ridges to hide from detection. His mind worked like a finely tuned machine. He had faced hostile environments before, but nothing had demanded this level of focus and moral courage. A sudden gust threw snow into his eyes. When he blinked it clear, he saw movement, shapes shifting in the distance. Consortium drones. The low hum of their engines cut through the storm. Kai froze, holding his breath. The hatchlings pressed close, sensing his tension. One squeaked softly. He whispered, "Stay quiet. We move only when safe." He ducked behind a ridge, calculating the drone's path. The creatures weren't fully grown, but they were already intelligent enough to react to danger. Kai had an idea. He set small heat beacons, remnants from old mining equipment, across the ridge, creating false signals. The drones swerved toward them, scanning for life, while Kai moved quietly along the opposite path, his jacket heavy with the weight of 3 fragile lives. Every step was a careful balance of speed and caution. The wind howled in his ears, almost drowning out his own heartbeat. The hatchlings chirped softly as if encouraging him. Kai felt a flicker of something deep inside, a mix of fear, responsibility, and determination. He had trained for survival, for battle, for missions with no room for error. But this was different. This was about courage not just for himself, but for those who could not fight for themselves. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The storm never let up. Ice formations shifted, threatening to collapse. One hatchling wriggled too close to the edge of a narrow ridge. Without thinking, Kai lunged, catching it just before it slid toward the cliff. His heart hammered. The realization hit him fully: one wrong move and all 3 could die. Yet, in that moment, the bond between them strengthened. They trusted him. Finally, as night began to creep over the valley, the storm softened to a bitter wind. Kai found a small overhang, enough to shield them briefly. He set the hatchlings down gently, their tiny claws gripping his gloves as if testing their safety. They looked up at him, wide-eyed and vulnerable, yet with a spark of trust and curiosity. Kai pressed his forehead to the ice wall, trying to catch his breath. The world was still unforgiving. The Consortium patrols were still out there, and the journey to the northern crater was far from over. But for the first time he felt something more than survival driving him forward. It was responsibility. It was courage. And it was hope. He whispered softly to the hatchlings, "We move at first light. Stick with me, and we get through this together." They chirped back, small high-pitched sounds that seemed almost like agreement. As Kai lay there, staring at the frozen horizon, a shadow passed over the valley. His pulse quickened. Another patrol? Or something worse? Whatever it was, the next part of their journey would test every ounce of his skill, his intelligence, and his courage. The hatchlings weren't just passengers. They were companions, and now, survival depended on all of them. Kai tightened his grip on the jacket, heart pounding, knowing that the dawn would bring the real challenge. Kai Mercer tightened his coat around the hatchlings as the pale light of dawn began to slice through the storm clouds. The wind still howled, but the blizzard had softened into a sharp, bitter bite. The northern crater, the mission's original objective, lay somewhere ahead, hidden by snow-covered ridges and jagged ice spires. Every step forward was dangerous, not just for him but for the tiny creatures huddled against his chest. The hatchlings had grown more alert overnight. Their translucent wings twitched as they felt the movement, their tiny claws gripping the fabric of his coat. One of them peered out, its luminous eyes scanning the valley as if measuring the dangers Kai couldn't see. He smiled faintly. Despite their small size, they were beginning to act like companions, not just passengers. But danger was never far behind. The low hum of drones reached him first, metallic, precise, unyielding. The consortium's patrols were relentless. Kai had no weapons to fight them directly. He had only his mind, his knowledge of terrain, and the small flashes of instinct that had kept him alive in hostile zones before. He crouched behind a ridge, the hatchlings pressing against him, feeling the same tension. He analyzed the drone's flight patterns. They moved predictably, scanning in broad arcs, but their sensors were sensitive to heat. That gave him a plan. He ripped apart a broken mining beacon, connecting it to a small heat source scavenged from his pack. He set it on the edge of a nearby cliff, then hid behind another ridge, watching. The drone veered toward the beacon, sensors locked on the false signal. It dipped and hovered near the cliff, completely unaware of Kai's movement. He exhaled quietly, moving in a crouch, careful not to jostle the hatchlings. Their tiny bodies felt impossibly light and fragile, yet in this moment they were his responsibility, his allies. The climb over the ridge was perilous. Loose ice threatened to crack under his weight, and a misstep could send him tumbling into the jagged crevices below. Each footfall was deliberate, each handhold tested for stability. One hatchling squirmed, making a soft squeak. Kai froze. The sound echoed faintly, and for a moment he feared the drone had detected them. But it drifted onward, fooled by the beacon. He let out a quiet breath and whispered, "Good job, little ones. We keep moving." The valley below opened up into a frozen riverbed, a ribbon of ice stretching toward the northern crater. The wind funneled through it, carrying snow in sharp gusts. Kai had to move fast. He adjusted his pack, ensuring the hatchlings were secure against his chest. One chirped and flapped its tiny wings, almost instinctively creating a gust that helped mask their heat signature. He realized with a start that the creatures were already learning from him, reacting to danger almost like seasoned scouts. A sudden rumble froze him mid-step. Snow shifted along the cliffs, dislodging rocks. One small boulder tumbled dangerously close, and Kai lunged, catching it with his free hand before it could strike the hatchlings. His muscles burned, his heart raced, but the creatures inside his jacket had not made a sound. Their trust, and their survival, depended entirely on him. The northern crater loomed ahead, jagged and shadowed, a basin surrounded by towering cliffs. According to his maps, it was only a few kilometers away, but every step was a risk. The consortium drones had begun a wider sweep, scanning systematically. Kai knew he could not outrun them in open terrain. He needed to use the storm and the terrain itself as an advantage. He led the hatchlings along a narrow ice ledge that hugged the cliffs, barely a foot wide in some places. The wind tried to knock him off balance, and his gloved hands had to grip the icy wall to prevent a fatal slip. Each move demanded concentration and calculation. One wrong judgment and the hatchlings, or he, would fall. Hours passed. Fatigue gnawed at him, but he pushed onward, fueled by necessity and a strange, stubborn determination. The hatchlings, despite their size, seemed to sense the importance of the journey. They chirped softly, nudging him as if encouraging him forward. Kai allowed a brief smile, a rare moment of warmth in a frozen, hostile world. As dusk approached, the first signs of the crater's energy emissions appeared on his scanners, weak, fluctuating pulses indicating the cores were nearby. His heart raced. They were close. but so were the patrols. The low hum of drones returned, louder this time, scanning more aggressively. Kai realized that the final stretch would demand more than careful steps. It would require cunning, speed, and precise coordination between him and the hatchlings. He crouched behind a ridge, surveying the open approach. One hatchling poked its head out, its luminous eyes scanning the valley. Kai whispered, "We're almost there. We stay close, we stay quiet, and we make it through." Their small bodies pressed against him as if understanding every word. The storm had calmed slightly, but tension filled the valley. Kai's mind raced with possibilities. Could he use the hatchling's instincts to distract the drones? Could he reach the cores without being detected? He glanced at the creatures in his coat, their tiny hearts beating against his chest, and felt a surge of resolve. This wasn't just survival anymore, it was about courage, ingenuity, and protecting lives that depended entirely on him. A sudden shadow crossed the ice below, moving faster than the storm's gusts. Kai froze. Was it a patrol? Or something even more dangerous? He pressed the hatchlings close, feeling their tiny claws dig lightly into his jacket. The cliff edge trembled under his boots. Ahead lay the northern crater, the mission's objective, and a chance to prove that one human, armed with courage and cleverness, could defy impossible odds. Kai's jaw tightened. "Let's move," he whispered. The hatchlings chirped softly, and together, they stepped into the open valley, into a gauntlet of ice, drones, and deadly risk, each heartbeat bringing them closer to the unknown, and to the real test of human courage. Kai Mercer pressed himself against the jagged cliff, scanning the valley below. The northern crater was close now, its dark silhouette etched against the fading storm. Energy pulses from the cores flickered faintly in his scanner, almost calling to him, but between him and the target lay the consortium's patrols, and the open ice plain that offered no cover. One wrong move and everything would be lost. The hatchlings, the mission, even his own life. He crouched low, feeling the weight of 3 small dragon hearts against his chest. The hatchlings were restless but alert, their tiny wings twitching in anticipation. Kai realized that they weren't just following him anymore, they were part of the strategy. Their instincts, their reactions, their tiny bursts of heat could be used to distract the drones and give him a path forward. The first drone passed overhead, its sensors scanning in slow arcs. Kai's pulse quickened. He had no weapons, only quick thinking and improvisation. Digging through his pack, he pulled out a few pieces of broken mining tech, small emitters designed to project heat and light for geological scans. He connected them to a portable power cell, creating a crude but effective decoy. He carefully tossed the first device onto a small ice plateau, making sure it would show up on the drone's thermal sensors. As predicted, the drone altered its course, hovering toward the false signal. Kai exhaled quietly and motioned for the hatchlings to stay low. They responded immediately, shifting their weight to keep their heat signatures minimal. One hatchling even flapped its tiny wings, producing a brief gust that scattered snow over the decoy, making it look more natural. Kai moved slowly, hugging the shadows of the cliffs. Every step had to be precise. Loose ice cracked under his boots, sending shivers through his body. He adjusted his path, using fallen rocks and jagged outcroppings for cover. The hatchlings chirped softly, almost like encouragement. Their trust in him was growing and he could feel it. Every instinct he had as a human, as a protector, screamed to keep them alive, to guide them through the deadly gauntlet ahead. As he neared the central plain, he realized the drones were not acting alone. A patrol rover emerged, a hulking machine designed to crush or capture anything in its path. The ice beneath it cracked and groaned under the weight, sending a shiver through Kai's spine. There was no way to outrun it in open space. He had to think fast. He remembered a narrow crevice along the ice, just wide enough for a person, too small for the rover. But the path was dangerous, littered with unstable ice spikes and a sharp drop on one side. One wrong step and the consequences would be fatal. He glanced down at the hatchlings. They chirped and flapped, tiny bodies pressing against him as if sensing his urgency. Kai made his decision. Using the drone's temporary distraction from the decoys, he ran across the ice plain, weaving through small snowdrifts to mask his heat. The hatchlings clung to him, their small claws digging into his coat. One slipped slightly and he caught it mid-fall, heart pounding. The rover's sensors swiveled, catching a glimpse of movement, but snow and shadows hid him just enough. Kai reached the crevice and ducked inside, squeezing himself through the narrow opening. The hatchlings followed, their tiny wings brushing against the icy walls. The rover crashed onto the plain outside, thrashing uselessly as its sensors recalibrated. Kai exhaled a long, tense breath, knowing that the small detour had bought them only minutes, not safety. The crater was now within reach, but the patrols were regrouping. Kai knew they would soon sweep the area thoroughly. He needed a plan, something bold and unexpected. He scanned the terrain and saw an overhang above the crater, jagged rocks forming a natural funnel. If he could lure the drones there, he could create a controlled collapse using small charges from his pack. It was risky, any miscalculation could bury him with the hatchlings, but he had no other choice. He whispered to the hatchlings, "This is it. Trust me." They chirped softly, almost in acknowledgement. With precise timing, he set the remaining decoys leading the drones toward the funnel. Then he triggered the charges remotely, sending rocks crashing down. The drones spun helplessly, caught in the debris, their sensors scrambled. Kai used the distraction to sprint the final stretch toward the crater, his coat heavy but the hatchlings surprisingly calm. When he reached the crater's edge, the energy cores glowed faintly, almost like beacons of hope. He knelt, placing the hatchlings on a safe patch of ice nearby. Their tiny eyes gleamed as they watched him, fully aware of the danger still surrounding them. Kai activated the first core, feeling the hum of power beneath his hands. The warmth was immediate, but it also drew attention. Distant alarms echoed through the valley, the consortium realizing something had been tampered with. Kai's mind raced. He had no time to collect all the cores before the patrols closed in. Every second counted. Yet he felt a surge of confidence. They had made it this far. The hatchlings had survived, trusted him, and even acted as allies. Together, they had turned the impossible odds slightly in their favor. A low rumble shook the ice. Kai looked up, realizing the next challenge was coming fast. The patrols would not let this intrusion go unanswered, and the terrain itself was still deadly. He gathered the hatchlings, his jaw tight with determination. This was no longer just a mission, it was a test of human courage, intelligence, and morality. They had come too far to fail now. Kai glanced at the horizon. Snow and shadows moved strangely, he couldn't tell if it was storm or enemy forces. But one thing was certain, the real challenge, the real danger was just ahead. And whatever it was, Kai would meet it head-on, with the hatchlings beside him, trusting him completely, their small hearts beating in unison with his own. With a final glance at the glowing cores, he whispered, "Hold on. We're not done yet." And together, they stepped toward the unknown, ready for the deadly bargain that awaited them. Kai Mercer crouched at the rim of the northern crater, his breath heavy in the cold air. The faint hum of the energy cores beneath his hands sent vibrations up his arms, a reminder of how close he was to completing the mission. But the moment was fleeting. From the shadows of the cliffs, a patrol of consortium mercenaries emerged, their weapons gleaming in the pale light. There was no cover, no escape route that didn't risk a fall into the jagged ice below. Every calculation he'd made so far had led to this point, either survival or failure, and the hatchlings' lives hung in the balance. He pressed the hatchlings close, feeling their tiny hearts beating against his chest. Their trust in him had grown into a bond that was unbreakable in the short months they'd shared. He had no guns, no reinforcements, only his mind, the environment, and the creatures who now acted like small, instinctive allies. Every second counted. One wrong move and they would all be lost. Kai's eyes darted across the terrain. The energy cores were exposed, a tempting target for the mercenaries who had clearly underestimated the human. He realized that direct confrontation was impossible. The consortium expected fear, compliance, and retreat. He intended to give them neither. The hatchlings stirred, sensing the tension. Kai whispered to them, "Follow my lead. Be ready." One of them chirped and flapped its tiny wings, creating a gust that carried a thin layer of snow into the mercenaries' eyes. It was small, almost comical, but it was enough to buy Kai a moment. He moved swiftly, using the uneven terrain to his advantage. The mercenaries fired, but their shots were slowed by snow and ice. Kai darted between jagged ice spires, his hands gripping rocks and ice walls for stability. He tossed a small rock in one direction, the sound echoing, drawing the attention of the closest soldier. The hatchlings reacted instinctively, flapping and squeaking, creating distractions that seemed coordinated. Kai realized, with a rush of adrenaline, that their tiny actions could shape the battlefield. He smiled grimly. He reached the first energy core, hands working quickly to stabilize it. The hum of power grew louder, resonating in the frozen air, but it also sent a signal that the mercenaries couldn't ignore. One soldier moved to intercept. Kai had anticipated this. He triggered a nearby cluster of ice spikes with a controlled release from his pack, sending shards crashing between them. The soldier was forced back, narrowly avoiding injury, giving Kai precious seconds to act. But the situation escalated. A second patrol emerged from the cliffs above, cutting off the exit. Kai's pulse raced. The crater offered no safe retreat, and the mercenaries were methodical, precise, and heavily armed. He glanced at the hatchlings. They were calm, poised, ready to act at his signal. Their trust in him had become their courage. Kai took a deep breath and made a decision. Using the energy core's partial activation, he created a controlled surge, sending a pulse through the ice beneath the mercenaries' feet. Cracks spidered outward, forcing them to lose footing. Some stumbled, scrambling to maintain balance, while others fired wildly, blinded by their own distraction. It was risky, the ice could have collapsed entirely, but Kai calculated the pressure points perfectly. The hatchlings took initiative. One dove toward a fallen mercenary, flapping to knock a weapon aside. Another darted past a drone, its tiny body sending off a reflection that scrambled sensors. The smallest flapped high, creating a gust that obscured movement. Kai moved like a conductor of a strange orchestra, every action precise, every choice life or death. Finally, Kai reached the last energy core. His fingers worked quickly, securing it while the hatchlings darted in coordinated motions, shielding him from the remaining soldiers. The pulse of the energy cores grew stronger, resonating through the crater. The mercenaries' formation broke entirely and panic spread. Kai could see their discipline crumble under a combination of ingenuity, environment, and the unexpected courage of his tiny allies. With the cores secured, Kai sprinted toward the edge of the crater, the hatchlings clinging tightly to him. The remaining soldiers fired, but the ice beneath their feet gave way, forcing them to retreat or risk plummeting into the jagged depths. The humans' ingenuity, combined with the creature's instinct, had turned the battle. Every calculated risk, every act of courage had shifted the impossible odds. Kai paused at the lip of the crater, looking down at the expanse below. The hatchlings chirped softly, their eyes shining with trust and admiration. For a fleeting moment, the frozen valley was silent, the storm reduced to a whisper. Kai felt a deep, visceral satisfaction, not for victory but for what they had survived together. They had faced overwhelming odds, and against every expectation they had endured. He looked back at the surviving mercenaries, retreating in disarray, and felt a surge of pride. Humans were fragile, yes, but resilient beyond measure when courage, intelligence, and determination combined. And in that moment he understood something profound. Even the smallest acts, an instinctive flapping of wings, a carefully placed decoy, a calculated surge of ice, could shape the course of events in ways that brute force never could. Kai's jaw tightened as he gathered the hatchlings into his arms. "We did it," he whispered. "But we're not safe yet. There's more ahead." He glanced at the crater, the glowing cores, and the jagged horizon beyond. The battle had been won, but survival demanded more than victory. It demanded vigilance, courage, and trust, qualities humans had shown in abundance. The hatchlings chirped in response, tiny voices echoing against the ice walls. Their bond was cemented in fire, ice, and peril. Together they would face whatever came next. And Kai knew with certainty that the challenges ahead would test every ounce of his skill, every spark of ingenuity, and every piece of human courage he possessed. He adjusted his grip, scanning the horizon. The storm had passed, but the valley remained a dangerous, unpredictable place. Kai's mind raced with possibilities. The consortium would return. The terrain itself could shift beneath them. Yet he felt an unshakable confidence. They had survived against impossible odds. They had fought not with weapons alone, but with courage, intelligence, and the unbreakable bond between human and dragon. Kai whispered again, "We move forward. Together." The hatchlings chirped in unison, flapping their wings as if pledging loyalty. And with that they stepped off the crater's edge, ready to face the unknown challenges ahead, undaunted, unstoppable, and entirely human in their courage. Kai Mercer stepped cautiously across the frozen valley, the hatchlings clinging to his coat, their tiny claws digging in like they knew their lives depended on him, and they did. The northern crater behind them glowed faintly, the recovered energy cores pulsing with a steady hum. The storm had passed, leaving a quiet cold that pressed against his face and hands. For the first time in days, Kai allowed himself a moment to breathe, but he knew the danger wasn't gone. The consortium patrols were still out there. They had regrouped and would soon realize the human had survived, and not just survived but outwitted them. Kai scanned the horizon, calculating, planning. There were no shortcuts, no easy paths. But the hatchlings had proven themselves more than companions. They were allies, each instinctive movement complementing his strategies. As they moved across the icy plain, Kai noticed signs of movement in the distance. Shadows shifted among the rocks, consortium scouts, likely tracking residual energy from the cores. He crouched low, pressing the hatchlings closer. Their wings fluttered nervously, but they trusted him. Kai whispered, "Stay calm. We keep moving quietly." His voice was soft but firm, a human promise that carried weight the creatures could sense. He spotted a narrow canyon leading away from the patrols, jagged cliffs forming a natural barrier. It was treacherous terrain, but it offered cover. Kai guided the hatchlings down the rocky path, each step precise. The snow crunched under his boots, echoing faintly in the silence. One misstep, one wrong grip, could send them plummeting into the jagged ice below. But Kai's mind was sharp. He calculated every hold, every landing, using instincts honed through years of survival and engineering. The hatchlings chirped softly as if offering encouragement. Kai smiled faintly. He realized that the bond they had formed was more than survival. It was loyalty forged in peril, fire, and trust. These creatures depended on him not just to live but to thrive. And he, in turn, felt a deep sense of purpose, the kind only humans experience when they protect lives that cannot protect themselves. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the canyon. Rocks shifted above them, threatening to collapse. A patrol drone appeared at the canyon's entrance, its sensors scanning. Kai froze, weighing options. The canyon was narrow, the drone could block their path. But he had a plan. Using the hatchlings' learned instincts, he whispered instructions, directing them to act as distractions. One flapped its wings, creating a gust that disoriented the drone's sensors. Another darted past, drawing its attention to the wrong side. The smallest squeaked sharply, a sound that mimicked human voices picked up on the drone's microphones. Kai moved like a shadow, agile and deliberate, guiding the hatchlings through the canyon. The drone stumbled, its flight path erratic, allowing Kai to press forward. Every second was a battle of wits, every move a test of courage and ingenuity. By the time they reached the canyon's exit, the drone was spinning in confusion, unable to continue pursuit. Kai exhaled a quiet sigh of relief. They had survived again through strategy, intelligence, and relentless determination. The valley opened up ahead, and in the distance, Kai saw a plateau, a vantage point where he could signal for extraction and plan the next move. He led the hatchlings carefully, aware of every sound and movement. Their trust was unwavering. Each small creature mirrored his patience, his alertness, and his courage. Kai realized that they had evolved from helpless hatchlings into active participants, allies who had learned to navigate danger alongside him. Reaching the plateau, Kai set the hatchlings down. They chirped and flapped, scanning the area, eyes bright with awareness. Kai crouched beside them, feeling a profound sense of connection. He had faced storms, drones, patrols, and treacherous ice, yet here they were, alive, together, victorious not by sheer strength but by human ingenuity, courage, and morality. Kai looked at the energy cores in the distance. Their glow was steady, reliable, a symbol of survival and hope. Recovering them had been vital, but the bond he had formed with the hatchlings was the true prize. They were no longer mere creatures of instinct. They had become partners in survival, recognizing his leadership, his commitment, and his willingness to risk everything for them. A shadow fell across the plateau and Kai's eyes sharpened. A consortium patrol was returning, this time in force. He assessed the situation, calculating the risk and the path forward. But he wasn't afraid. He had faced impossible odds before, and the hatchlings had proven that intelligence, courage, and loyalty could turn the tide against far superior forces. He whispered, "We move together. Stay close, trust me." The hatchlings responded with tiny, chirping calls, their wings flapping in rhythm. Kai knew that whatever came next, they would face it as one unit, a team bound by courage and mutual trust. Humans could endure, adapt, and lead, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The patrol approached, but Kai was ready. Using the plateau's natural cover and the hatchlings' quick instincts, he devised a distraction. Rocks tumbled down the slope, snow and ice shifted to obscure movement, and the hatchlings darted in patterns that drew the patrol away from him. It was audacious, almost reckless, yet precise. Kai moved swiftly, retrieving the cores and guiding the hatchlings to safety. Finally, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Kai and the hatchlings reached a hidden outpost, its perimeter secured and shielded from further patrols. He knelt, setting the creatures gently on a raised platform. They chirped, wings fluttering, but remained close to him, as if acknowledging the human who had saved them, not just from the storm but from the relentless reach of the consortium. Kai exhaled, feeling a deep weight lift from his chest. He had completed the mission, yes, but more importantly he had proven something enduring, that courage, intelligence and morality could overcome impossible odds. That humans, even alone and outnumbered, could protect life, inspire loyalty and shape outcomes in ways brute force never could. The hatchlings gathered around him, their tiny bodies pressed close, eyes shining with trust. Kai looked out over the frozen valley one last time, knowing that their survival and bond were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Against ice, storm and overwhelming odds he had endured, and so had they. Kai whispered softly, "We made it. Together." The hatchlings chirped in unison, flapping their wings, their trust and loyalty complete. In that moment the valley felt still, the air alive with possibility, and Kai understood something profound. Humanity, when brave, clever and compassionate, could leave a mark that no storm or enemy could erase. Together they turned toward the rising sun, a human and 3 dragon hatchlings, moving forward into an uncertain world, undaunted, unstoppable and bound forever by courage, trust and unbreakable loyalty.